The second character that I want to mention after Rogue is actually the character that got me into reading comics in the first place, and that is Cassandra Cain, Batgirl. She's not Barbara Gordon. Barbara Gordon was the Batgirl that came before her. Barbara Gordon has red hair, and that is the one that is typically pushed by DC these days. When you look at DC superhero girls, you see a Batgirl with red hair, and that is Barbara Gordon. And if you ask me, Barbara Gordon is, if you ask me, she's not anywhere near as interesting as Cassandra Cain is. But Barbara Gordon is also still a good character, though. I don't want to take anything away from her. Cassandra Cain was actually the Batgirl, the first Batgirl to have her own book. There have been, Barbara Gordon was not the first, but she is the one currently in the Batgirl book, but she was not the first to have her own book. That honor goes to Cassandra Cain, whose series started in 2000 and then ran until 2006. Now, Cassandra Cain holds a special place in my heart after Rogue. While I mostly knew Rogue from the animated series and from the video games, X-Men vs. Street Fighter video games, I didn't get into reading actual American comics until Cassandra Cain came along. Before that, I was reading mostly manga books. Manga. But mostly I wasn't even reading. I was just watching cartoons. So I was in the Navy. I was stationed in Washington, and I was going through training for my job, and I was about to transfer to Pensacola, and where I was going to continue my training before I eventually went to be stationed in Japan. And during this time, while I was about to transfer, I went to the the commissary, and I was just browsing through some books, and I found, I laid eyes on these Batgirl comic books, and I was like, wow, she looks interesting. She grabbed my attention. She had a full face mask on, and for some reason, that just, I don't know why it just grabbed me. You couldn't see her face at all. And for a female character, I thought that was pretty rare, but I didn't buy it because it was just like, wow, this is a female character and she's wearing a mask, so that's different. Her look just grabbed me. And so I picked up some of her books. Actually, I browsed a couple of them, then I just started grabbing up a whole bunch of her books off the shelf. I grabbed up as many as I could. And so while, also, this was it was a little bit of a lonely time in my life. I was probably 19. No, I think I was still, I just turned 19. Yep, I had just turned 19, and I basically shipped off immediately after graduating from college. So, I'm not graduating from high school. So I was 18 through my training, when I went through my basic training, and I went through my school training for my job. And I was a little lonely. I didn't really have anybody in my family. I was separated from my family, and I was pretty bored and lonely. So reading through these comics, Cassandra Cain comics, and incidentally, this is also the time when I fell in love with Toni Braxton. I loved listening to Toni Braxton when I was reading these comics. I began, it started off, I guess you could say, typical of a lot of the stories that we've seen before, where, you have a character who was born and raised to be an assassin. And, I think that trope has been done before plenty of times, but what really made Cassandra really, really interesting to me was the fact that she could not speak. And I know I took a long time to get to that, but what really made her interesting to me was that she not only did she wear a full face mask when she was in costume, but she couldn't speak because her father, who had raised her and trained her, was actually really abusive toward her. But at times he still showed that he loved her. He had deprived her of any. He didn't speak to her, and he didn't teach her how to talk because he didn't want her to use her communication. He didn't want her to develop those skills of verbal communication. What he wanted from her was for her to understand the language of the body language, and basically she speaks body language, and she is able to looking at a person to know what they're thinking by their body, by the things that they don't even realize that they're doing. She's able to read their body language, and tell what they're thinking. So she can understand us, but we can't understand her because she can't speak. And it's so interesting to go through a story. Your comic book is a visual medium. You have to know what's inside the character's head. You have to you have to see them speak to people. Well, here we are with a character who can only emote, even with the black mask on. I wish I could show you like in this picture down here in the lower right. They would use her mask as one of the ways her facial expressions would be really exaggerated to show what was in her mind, to show what she was thinking, what she was feeling, since she couldn't speak. And eventually later, she learned to start speaking in sentences, but it was mostly broken and it came later. But at the beginning, she couldn't speak, and I was just blown away by this character. And so she develops so like I said, she was born and raised to be an assassin. But after killing, I think it was just one person, she realized as a child, when she killed that one person that her dad had asked her to kill, she almost felt betrayed by that. When she saw the man's blood on her hands and she realized what she had done, she knew instinctively that she had done something wrong, even though she had been trained all her life to do it. When she actually did it, she instinctively knew that it was wrong. And her father, let's just talk about some of the training that she endured as a child. Her father would actually shoot her with a loaded gun in the back while she wasn't looking or expecting it, so that she would her reflexes, she would react faster. She took a bullet to the shoulder once. she was actually hit. She took a bullet to the shoulder as a child, but this was his way of training her to not let her guard down, to react faster, and not only to dodge a bullet, but to strike back at the person before they have a chance to shoot her again or shoot at her again. And so it was a really abusive situation that she had grown up in. And yet later on in her story, we see she confronts her father in prison. He's in prison, and only he knows her birthday. No, if I remember correctly, I don't think she even knows her birthday. But he remembers that because somehow, some way, it's revealed that he still loves her. And Cassandra Cain, she comes to this realization, well, dang, this guy is he's a criminal, he's a villain, he's horrible, but at the same time, he's still my dad. And so it's a shame what DC's done with him now. They've completely ruined his and her character. But anyway, dragging this on too long. So Batman, though, when Batman meets Cassandra Cain, he meets her during No Man's Land, where Gotham is really an earthquake has hit and the city is absolutely lawless and chaotic, and the criminals have taken over. It's like almost like Mad Max. And so, but Cassandra, when he meets Cassandra, he takes her in. She doesn't have anywhere else to go, so he takes her in, and she eventually ends up putting on the Batgirl costume, and her series starts there. And so Batman becomes a surrogate father to her. He becomes like an adoptive father. And he eventually adopts her, and she takes his last name. So she becomes Cassandra Cain Wayne. And so her relationship with Batman is like a father and daughter relationship. He really cares for her. And when Batman begins to dig into her past to find out exactly who Cain, what was his name? I can't remember. I think it was just Cain. Who Cain was and what he had done. And Cain is no slouch. He's quite a fighter. But Batman, gets into a fight with him. And even though Batman gets beat up pretty badly as well, he still puts Cain in a hurt locker. And you get to see Batman's loving side. You get to see his compassionate side. You get to see Batman. That's another thing about Cassandra Cain. She brings that out of Batman. Batman is not just a brutal, frightening sort of vigilante. He's a caring person. And you get to see his vulnerabilities. You get to see how caring he is when he's around Cassandra Cain, because he cares for her and he wants to protect her. But at the same time, Cassandra Cain is already a trained assassin. And when she has her abilities, she can compete. She can hang with Batman in a fight. And so while he still has some things to teach her and to train her on, such things such as working in a team, she is also still capable on her own. But it's not coming from I'm a woman. I don't need you to explain anything to me. I don't need to learn anything from a man. I don't take anything from a man. I can do it all on my own. No, she trained under Batman too. Batman has some things to teach her. And so that's male and female working together. But anyway, she has so many touching stories because she's so naive about things too. Like, one of the things that she truly believes in is a person's ability to change. She really truly believes, as a person, she used to be an assassin, so she knows that a person who was once one thing in their life can be reformed and they can change and become something else. So as a crime fighter, she's not out there just to beat up the bad guy. She's out there believing that people can actually change. And we see that, at least that's one thing that they kept in her newer stories. They kept that sort of thing going with Clayface. She believes Clayface can change. Clayface doesn't have to be a criminal all his life. So at least they kept that intact about her. But I remember there was a story about this guy. It was it's a tough read, because you see this criminal at the beginning of the story break into this convenience store, or I think it's like a 7-Eleven, and he chokes this woman to death behind the counter. And you see her choked to death, and you see the grief of her mother mourning her daughter, and you think, man, this guy deserves to die. But Cassandra Cain, later in the story, she comes in and she tries to rescue this guy because he's about to go to the gas chamber. And you're like, well, why would she help this guy? And you realize that some time has passed, and Cassandra Cain is like, she's trying to explain to people the best she can with her limited speech abilities that he's not that guy anymore. The man that they're executing is not the same man as the man who murdered that woman some years ago. So she doesn't want this criminal to die simply because he has changed and he genuinely regrets doing what he did. And you know, although the mother of the woman still wants him to die, she hasn't gotten over her pain. But however, this guy has truly reformed and has truly regretted what he did. And Cassandra Cain, that's all she sees in him, is that he's not that person anymore, and she desperately wants to save him. But by the end of the story, even though she breaks him out of jail, by the end of the story, they take him and they say, no, he committed this crime. He has to pay the price, regardless of how he's changed now. He still committed the crime. His past still remains, and therefore he has to go back. So they put him back into the gas chamber again. And then at that, you know, he was ready to die at first, but then he got a glimpse of that he might actually be able to get free. And now he goes right back in the gas chamber. So that makes it even worse for him. And so that's kind of a twisted ending. And so he dies, and Batgirl mourns for him because she's not mourning for the guy who murdered the girl. She's mourning for the guy who he became, who changed and regretted his past actions. So she's a really excellent character, and because of her, I'm reading comics now. And I went back and read some of Rogue's comics, caught up with her, you know, and most of that is because of Cassandra Cain getting me into comics. So I'll do another character highlight, a character that I love, pretty soon. I'll do Eiko. That's a Japanese anime character who many people don't know. And Eiko is one of the most simplest characters, and there's not a whole lot of depth to her, but I love her anyway. So, thanks for listening.